I woke up to a quiet morning in Omaha, Nebraska, the kind of spring day where the sunlight stretches lazily across the suburban streets, and the birds make their tentative calls as if testing the air for any signs of change. My kitchen smelled faintly of brewed tea, and I sat at the small oak table with my mug warming my hands, feeling the ordinary calm that mornings usually bring. I scrolled through my phone while waiting for the first sip, my thumb brushing past updates, memes, and work emails. Everything seemed typical until it wasn't. A photo appeared on my feed, my sister, Claire, in a flowing white gown, radiant against a backdrop of flowers and smiling guests. The caption read, "Best day of my life. Just married family only." I froze. My chest tightened, a quiet heat rising beneath the calm. I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't mentioned. There was no prior notice. No invitation. I told myself it must be a mistake, maybe just a courthouse ceremony. I tried to calm the stirrings of betrayal, reminding myself that family often makes mistakes, that life is messy, and maybe I just misunderstood the timing. But as I scrolled through the comments, I realized everyone I knew had been there, friends, relatives, extended family, all smiling and congratulating. My name was absent. My phone felt heavier in my hand. I tried calling my mother. Straight to voicemail. My sister? Ignored. The past flickered through my mind, subtle digs, passive-aggressive remarks, little moments I had dismissed as trivial. Suddenly, a pattern emerged. This wasn't accidental. I hadn't been forgotten, I had been deliberately excluded. For a moment, I entertained the idea of showing up, making my presence known, demanding answers. But a quiet voice inside stopped me. Why go where you weren't wanted? Maya Angelou's words echoed in my mind. If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I felt the simmering anger transform into a different kind of resolve. Instead of confronting them, I would take a step for myself. I opened a travel booking site and impulsively reserved a solo trip to Sedona, Arizona. For years I had postponed adventures for work, obligations, the family that never quite prioritized me. This time, I would go for healing, for clarity, not for revenge. Packing felt like a meditation. Each item I folded, from my hiking boots to my favorite novels, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. A worn photograph of Claire and me from childhood fell into my hands, and I held it against my chest. The memory of our closeness, before the quiet fractures began, was sharp and bittersweet. I scribbled a quick email to my boss, taking personal time. On the fridge, a sticky note, "Gone for peace. Don't wait up." I wasn't running from them. I was walking towards something I had ignored for too long: dignity, autonomy, and self-respect. On the plane, I pressed my forehead against the cool window and let the landscape blur beneath me. The city shrank, the suburbs giving way to open plains, then jagged red rocks in Arizona's distance. My thoughts hovered between betrayal and liberation. The woman seated beside me, older and quietly observant, offered a few words that seemed meant for me alone. Sometimes, leaving is the most loving thing you can do, for yourself. I nodded silently, sipping tomato juice, and memories of childhood Sunday brunches at home surfaced unbidden. A notification buzzed. My cousin had sent a group photo from the wedding. I ignored it. I turned off the phone, closing my eyes. I would no longer be part of that performance, of a family event that excluded me so intentionally. The hum of the airplane engines became a lullaby of possibility, a rhythm marking the distance between my past and what I was choosing to create. The plane touched down in Sedona, and the desert sunlight poured through the windows like molten gold, illuminating the jagged red rocks that had always felt like a sanctuary in pictures but never like home. I rolled my suitcase along the polished floors of the boutique hotel, greeted by a receptionist whose smile was warm enough to remind me of what kindness could feel like. Yet even in this serene environment, my heart carried the weight of exclusion, each step heavy with quiet hurt. I unpacked slowly, arranging my clothes and hiking gear as if methodically placing pieces of myself back in order. Sitting by the edge of the pool, I watched other travelers, couples, friends, families, laughing and sharing moments I wasn't part of. I opened my journal and wrote a single word: why? The desert air seemed to hold its breath with me, a silence that underscored the absurdity. People came here to find themselves. I had come to stop feeling. Later, I found myself in conversation with Helen, an older woman seated alone by the terrace. She had the kind of face shaped by years of experience, and a voice that carried calm authority. She spoke of being left out of her son's wedding, of the quiet pain that comes from expecting love and receiving mere obligation. "Family isn't always love," she said softly. "Sometimes it's just DNA and tradition." Her words struck me, comforting and cutting at the same time. In her story, I saw reflections of my own history, the long pattern of subtle exclusions and overlooked feelings. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to acknowledge the frustration, the sting I had long tried to rationalize away. I wasn't crazy for hurting. I was human for feeling. Returning to my room, I ignored the view of the canyon outside, focusing instead on the phone that buzzed insistently. It was Melissa, my cousin, one of the few people I still trusted. Her voice trembled when she spoke, almost spilling the secret before she could find the words. "I thought you knew. I assumed you chose not to come." And then, in a rush of awkward clarity, she revealed the truth. A secret family group chat had been created, and I had been intentionally left out. "They said you'd make it about yourself. That your presence might upset Mom," Melissa admitted, her tone a mixture of guilt and fear. I sat there, the phone clutched in my hand, letting the news sink in. Tears threatened, yet I pressed my jaw tight, refusing to let them fall. The betrayal cut deeper for its deliberateness, the exclusion not a mistake but a conscious choice. I spent the next few hours replaying memories I had once labeled as love. Holidays where I felt peripheral, gifts that seemed thoughtless or uneven, invitations that arrived too late or not at all. Remarks about being too emotional resurfaced with a sharper edge now, each one a subtle thread leading to this blatant disregard. The realization settled in. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of being included only to be left on the margins. I wrote again in my journal, "You weren't invited because you were never really welcome." Pouring wine into a glass, I stepped onto the balcony, letting the warm evening breeze carry the remnants of denial away. I began drafting a letter to Claire, unsent, words heavy with honesty yet measured with restraint. The next morning, I hiked a quiet trail, the desert stretching endlessly around me. Each step along the dusty path mirrored the distance I had created from my family, both literal and metaphorical. I paused on a ridge, the panorama wide and freeing, and snapped a photo of myself smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Not for anyone else, not for validation. The invitation didn't come, but neither did the obligation, I murmured to myself. The wedding photos still cluttered my phone, symbols of hurt I no longer needed. With deliberate fingers, I deleted each one, erasing the reminders of a day that had never included me. Standing on the cliff's edge as the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, I breathed in the clarity and quiet that came from accepting the truth, a peace born not of reconciliation but of acknowledgement, and a freedom that was entirely my own. I woke to the faint glow of Sedona's desert sunrise spilling across my hotel room, my phone blinking with several missed calls from an unknown number. For a moment, I let them sit, the silence feeling safer than any conversation could be. Curiosity won in the end, and I pressed play on the voicemail. My mother's voice, shaky yet defensive, filled the small space around me. "We thought it was best your sister didn't want tension on her day," she said, the words landing like a precise blade across my chest. I played it twice, each repetition more cruel than the last, disbelief twisting into bitter clarity. Her version of love had always come with conditions, invisible strings I had followed without question, and now those strings snapped with a quiet finality. Later, I wandered through Sedona's local market, the stalls alive with colors and scents that contrasted sharply with the stillness I carried inside. Each vendor offered smiles, trinkets, kind words, simple gestures that underscored what had been absent in my life for far too long. Memories flickered. The time I overheard my mother praising my sister's grace while dismissing my own emotions as temperamental, a lesson I had absorbed as a child that silence equaled survival. On impulse, I bought a wind chime, its soft metal tones a small rebellion, a tangible reminder that my voice could ring again. A shop owner leaned close and murmured, "Silence is golden, until it chokes you." I tucked her words into my chest like a shield. That evening, my phone buzzed again, insistent and unyielding. After hesitation, I answered, my mother's voice polite, controlled at first, but quickly unraveling. She painted me as difficult, as someone who made others uncomfortable, as though my feelings were the problem. I listened, letting the silence do the work. I did not argue, did not plead. In that quiet, the power shifted. And then, the truth emerged. The groom had requested no family drama, and everyone had agreed to hide the truth from me. Twist S3 hit with a weight I could not lift, yet I answered simply, I understand now, the finality in my tone carrying a quiet defiance that no apology could breach. I took an evening walk through the Red Rock trails, the desert stretching vast and still around me. The cool air, scented faintly with juniper, seemed to carry wisdom in its whisper. Survival meant shedding what did not serve me. A couple meditating on a rock invited me to join briefly, grounding me in presence I had not felt in years. I released the wind chime into a nearby branch, its gentle clink a soft assertion. My voice was mine, and I would not be muted by family fear or manipulation. I whispered to the desert, let them hear what silence sounds like when it's no longer afraid. Back at the hotel, a text from an unknown number made my chest tighten. You need to see this. Attached was a short video from the wedding reception. My sister, flawless in her gown, was arguing with the groom, a private storm captured in pixels. The irony settled in with a heavy weight. Exclusion, though cruel, had perhaps spared me from witnessing the performance of perfection and the hidden fractures behind it. I stared at the screen, my heart a mixture of shock and reluctant relief. When you're kept out of the lie, maybe the universe is offering protection in disguise. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of the desert through open windows, echoing the quiet before a storm yet to fully arrive. The late afternoon sun draped Sedona in a golden glow as I walked through the hotel's garden courtyard, the birds chirping around me a stark contrast to the tension simmering in my chest. My phone rang, and for a moment, I hesitated, knowing exactly who it was. My sister's name flashed across the screen, and the familiar upbeat, sugar-coated tone of her voice hit me like a practiced performance. Can't we just move past this? She asked, pretending nothing had happened, as if my absence at her wedding was some trivial misstep easily glossed over. I didn't raise my voice, didn't let anger dictate my response. Instead, I let calm defiance guide me. Are you asking me to forget, or to pretend I was never hurt? I asked, my words measured, deliberate. She stammered, insisting it was about family harmony, blaming me for overreacting, but the clarity I'd been nurturing over these days made her excuses powerless. Later, seated in the hotel lounge with my laptop, I began to lay out every cost I had shouldered for her wedding, the dress alterations, the deposit, the engraved glasses we toasted with. Each item, documented and supported with receipts and screenshots, was a reminder that I had invested more than my time. I had invested my presence and energy into a day that had never included me. I don't need you to apologize, I typed, fingers steady. But I do need you to understand I'm not invisible anymore. Her quick retort accused me of making a scene. I paused, pressed send, and leaned back. No, I whispered to myself. This time I'm documenting one. Empowerment surged through me, a quiet fire that refused to be ignored, a strength built not from vengeance but from boundaries and truth. The evening deepened, shadows stretching across the hotel courtyard as I opened my laptop again in the business center. I drafted an email to my parents and my sister, calm but unyielding, outlining contributions, timelines, and options. The message was simple. Public acknowledgement and full reimbursement, or no further contact, with documentation prepared for small claims and the family lawyer. I attached a photo of the wind chime I had bought days earlier, letting it symbolize the voice I refused to silence. This isn't revenge, I typed, pressing send, this is self-respect overdue. The weight of finality settled in, a controlled tension that felt both terrifying and liberating. Later, sipping a quiet cocktail in the hotel lounge, I met an older woman traveling alone. We talked about estranged families and the subtle injustices women endure, the way silence is often expected and patience punished. She shared her story of being left out of her own daughter's wedding due to drama. I nodded, recognizing the familiar ache. Maybe I'm not broken, I admitted softly. Maybe I'm just finally whole in a family that preferred fragments. Her eyes held understanding, a quiet validation that connected generations, and I felt a layer of peace settle over my shoulders for the first time in years. As evening fell, I walked back to the hotel courtyard. The wind chime hung, clinking softly in the gentle breeze, a testament to voice reclaimed. I whispered to it, I warned them. I gave them a chance. There was no triumph, only a grounded calm, the kind that comes from stopping the endless pursuit of approval and recognition. My phone buzzed, an inevitable interruption, and I saw my sister had posted a cryptic story. Family loyalty is everything, unless you're the one breaking it. I smirked, letting it sit. Let them spin their stories, I murmured. I've got mine, and I'm the narrator this time. I woke up to the quiet hum of the Sedona morning, the desert sunlight spilling through the blinds like it had no care for human drama. My inbox was still empty, my email unanswered, not even a received acknowledgement. A glance at the family group chat confirmed what I suspected. I had been removed. No explanation, no notice, just the void of absence. There was a fleeting sense of relief in the recognition that their silence could no longer wound me in the ways it once had. But grief lingered too, mourning the version of myself that had still hoped for inclusion. They think silence will punish me, I whispered to myself, stepping out the door. But I've lived in their silence long before this. I walked to a local cafe, where older couples sipped coffee and shared quiet conversation, and I envied their effortless peace, the kind I had never been allowed to feel. Scrolling through social media later, I stumbled upon a vague post from my aunt. Some people always play victim when they don't get their way. A tagged comment from a cousin I barely spoke to added, blood doesn't mean you won't be toxic. My hands hovered over the keyboard, tempted to respond, but instead, I took screenshots, not for retaliation but to preserve the evidence of their pettiness. Inner turmoil bubbled briefly, then settled into a controlled restraint. Their words could not define me, they could only reveal themselves. I wandered into a small local bookstore, seeking refuge among quiet shelves. A memoir caught my eye, the story of a woman who had left her toxic family at 40. One passage leapt off the page. Sometimes the only closure you'll get is the kind you give yourself. My eyes watered, not from sadness, but from recognition. I could see myself in her story. I purchased the book and scribbled a note to myself inside. I'm not crazy. I'm just no longer cooperating with dysfunction. Clarity was building within me, the empowerment of reflection settling into my bones. Later, I hiked a nearby trail, the red rocks towering above me, each step a reclamation of self. With every stride, I shed the weight of silenced stories, unreceived apologies, and the exhausting expectation of family approval. I imagined speaking to my younger self, you deserved more than silence. My heart raced, not from exertion, but from revelation. They needed my silence more than I ever needed their acceptance. With the desert wind at my back, I felt a cathartic shift, a transformation from passive endurance to active self-possession. As the sun dipped low, I checked my phone. A friend had sent a screenshot of a post from my sister, her wedding picture with the caption, "Family is who shows up." A comment below read, "Your sis didn't even bother coming?" And she had liked it without correction. I whispered, so we're rewriting history now. My eyes narrowed, not in hurt but in purpose. Then it's time I tell the truth, I murmured, feeling the full weight of my own narrative finally in my hands. I arrived at the hotel's business center early, the morning sunlight cutting through the quiet of the Sedona lobby. Jet lag tugged at my edges, but my focus was singular. I needed the files. Logging into the shared cloud account my father had used, I found a folder tucked away, almost like it had been waiting for me, Langley Estate, Confidential. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside was a scanned, handwritten will, signed by my father, and unmistakably clear. The words jumped at me. My daughter Jaretta shall inherit. I leaned back, staring at my reflection in the laptop screen, as if seeing myself recognized aloud for the first time. Shock and validation collided in a quiet storm. I was finally seen, acknowledged in a way words at family dinners had never achieved. Stepping outside into the garden lounge, still clutching the document, I was surprised to see Jolene, my 12-year-old niece, sidle up with 2 iced coffees. "I know you fixed the house, Aunt Jaretta," she said softly. Her voice carried a sincerity that pierced through the layers of adult pretense. I paused, startled by her memory of moments the grown-ups seemed to have erased. Her watching me hammer boards in Dad's workshop, while her mother carefully documented every staged wedding photo. Handing me one of the coffees, she said, "Thanks for not leaving us." Warmth flooded through me, an unexpected ally, a quiet acknowledgement of the truths the adults ignored. Later, I made my way to the local attorney's office I had researched before leaving home. Mr. Hayes greeted me with a professional nod as I laid the scanned will on his desk. "How many families hide the truth under a wedding cake?" I asked, voice steady. He raised an eyebrow, reviewing the document. The signature was genuine, witnesses accounted for, and no amendments appeared in the state records. I instructed him to send a certified copy to my mother and sister with a cover letter. "This is your notice of intent." Walking out of the office, I felt the air shift around me. It wasn't just my victory, it was a recalibration of power, my quiet assertion becoming undeniable. Back at the hotel, I returned to the lounge, settling beside the wind chime that had become my anchor. I sipped water and reflected, they've built their empire on silence. Now I've got the evidence that speaks. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother appeared, 2 simple words, "We'll talk." I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I stepped outside once more, the red rock formations bathed in the desert sun, letting the open sky amplify the sense of truth that was no longer hidden. As dusk settled over Sedona, I checked my email again. The subject line from my sister made me smirk, "Family legacy, urgent." Attached was a photograph of the wedding venue under moonlight, the tagline inscribed, "From Jaretta's vision, Roxanne's celebration." I whispered to myself, a mixture of amusement and resolve in my tone, "Not this time." I had built the foundation, she could try to rebrand it, but the narrative, the truth, was finally in my hands to tell. That evening, I was curled up on the hotel lounge sofa, the desert sun having surrendered to a quiet, violet dusk, when an unexpected email pinged through. My sister's PR team had sent an invitation, a live-streamed family Q&A to clear up false rumors. I stared at the screen for a long moment, reading and rereading, sensing the strategy behind the move. Damage control, now that the will and the screenshots were circulating. I could have declined, stayed in my sanctuary of clarity, but something inside me snapped. If they wanted a performance, I would show up, but I would not be acting. I centered myself, arranging receipts and notes beside my laptop, choosing my words carefully, rehearsing calm assertiveness. Every detail mattered. No room for misstep, no way to let old patterns dictate this encounter. I reminded myself, they had built empires on half-truths, but today, I would speak full truth. The live stream flickered to life. Warm lighting, floral cushions, and staged smiles. My mother, sister, and aunt sat in a tableau of manufactured ease, projecting faux sincerity. Roxanne began, "We just want to set the record straight and remind everyone that family is complicated." My voice joined the feed, steady, no makeup, background plain. "Then let's talk about the complications," I said, and the room seemed to tighten around those words. I introduced the old will, citing dates, legal context, and every contribution I had made to the property, the house restored with my hands. My mother interjected, "That was your choice." I replied without raising my voice, "No, that was your abdication." The tension climbed in waves, my clarity acting as a blade that cut through layers of curated illusion. For a brief, suspended moment, the stream hung in silence. Then, Jolene, my niece, appeared in the chat, her words unexpected, heartfelt. "Aunt Jaretta was the one who tucked me in when no one else came home." Comments from friends, former colleagues, and even my father's old associates began appearing, supporting truth over pretense. The narrative shifted. Their curated story faltered, replaced by raw testimony. I read aloud from my father's journal, letting the words resonate. "Jaretta holds this family's roots." Vulnerability became strength. The silence of years no longer silenced me. The stream ended abruptly, Roxanne's clipped voice stating, "We'll be handling this privately from now on." Too late. Clips were already reshared, trending under Jaretta Speaks. Messages flooded in, supportive, apologetic, angry. My lawyer suggested a public statement. I watched the ripple effect unfold from the hotel lounge, observing a younger woman showing the video to her grandmother. Calm and assertive, I absorbed the moment. My voice, once subdued, now carried weight. The quiet power of truth was spreading, uncontained. As I reached to shut off my phone, an unknown number rang. I hesitated. The voice was measured, deliberate. "Jaretta, this is Dean Langley, your father's brother. I think it's time we talked." My breath caught. Dean, estranged for decades after a family feud, was finally speaking. "You're not the only one who kept the truth quiet for too long," he continued. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. Somewhere in the folds of history, another story was waiting to be told, and finally, I was ready to listen. 2 weeks had passed since the live stream reshaped the narrative, and I found myself in a small historical town in Maine, sitting across from Uncle Dean at a quiet cafe by the lake. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and the water shimmered under a hesitant autumn sun. Dean looked older than I remembered, lines etched deeper from years of absence and silence, but his eyes held sincerity. He spoke carefully, recounting the fractures that had kept us apart, not entirely my father's doing, but a family caught in stubborn pride and old misunderstandings. He handed me a small, worn wooden box that had belonged to my father. Inside were letters, never sent, words of love and regret, reflections I had longed to hear. I read them slowly, tasting each line, feeling the weight of history lift, replaced by clarity and quiet healing. For the first time in years, grief and relief mingled without tension. With the newly certified will and validation on my side, I returned to the old house, now silent and vacant. Each room spoke of memory. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon from imagined holidays. The drawers still held forgotten notes from childhood, hiding places I had once treasured. On the staircase banister, carved initials marked each child, the last one declaring, "Jaretta equals Roots." My father had left this subtle acknowledgement, a signature of care long overlooked. I walked through the empty hallways with reverence, closing doors softly behind me, locking the house not with bitterness, but with completion, understanding that closure was mine to claim, not given by others. Back at my temporary desk, I wrote a public letter, an op-ed published in both the local paper and online. Titled, "Not All Families Love Alike," it reflected on forgiveness, not as forgetting, but as choosing peace over lingering pain. I quoted Maya Angelou, "Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it." I wrote of boundaries, dignity, and the importance of recognizing self-worth even in silence. The letter found resonance, quietly circulating through online communities, especially among older women who had felt the weight of unspoken family truths. There was no triumphalism, only an honest voice declaring that truth and self-respect were not mutually exclusive. A week later, a lavender envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was Jolene's high school graduation invitation, handwritten, each curve of ink intentional, each word a thread of connection. "If you come, it would mean the world to me. But I understand if you can't." I considered it the act of choice, not obligation. I bought a plane ticket, my heart buoyed not by duty but by possibility. In my luggage went the necklace my father had intended for his future granddaughter, ready to pass it to Jolene as a tangible link between generations, a reminder of love beyond conflict. At the airport, boarding my flight, an elderly woman across the aisle noticed the small journal I held. She leaned over, her voice soft but certain. "I read your letter. I wish I had your courage 30 years ago." I offered a smile and extended my hand. "It's never too late to tell your truth." Her fingers closed over mine firmly. "Then maybe it's time I do," she whispered back. I settled into my seat, the plane humming beneath me, carrying more than just passengers. It carried a sense of completion, of stories reclaimed, of voices long silenced now free to speak. I closed my eyes and let the quiet hope settle in, knowing the past would remain, but I had moved beyond it, ready to embrace what lay ahead with clarity and grace.